The sky over Tharkle was always dark. Thick clouds covered the sun, and smoke rose from the factories nearby. Dust blew across the slave yard, where broken souls waited in silence. Chains rattled softly with each movement. No one spoke because silence meant survival. Among them sat a young alien girl named Riva. Her skin was soft blue, covered in bruises and cuts. Her silver hair was dirty and tangled. She had been in chains for as long as she could remember. She didn't know her parents or her real name. Property 38 was all anyone called her. The slaver's voice shouted from a distance, "Move." He barked, and the crack of the whip followed. Riva flinched hard, even though the strike wasn't for her. But her body still shook, like it remembered every past hit. She didn't look up. She never looked up. Looking up meant drawing attention. And attention meant pain. Today was a buying day. New buyers had come from the city. Some were merchants, some were nobles, and some were worse. They walked past the cages, inspecting the slaves like animals. Riva stayed quiet in the back, hoping they would skip her. She had learned how to hide in plain sight. But then came the sound of unfamiliar boots. Not heavy, not loud, just calm steps. Someone stopped in front of her cage. She felt eyes on her, slowly, fearfully. She raised her head. He wasn't like the others. He was human. He wore a dusty coat, torn at the sleeve, and had a rough beard. His eyes were tired but kind. He didn't carry a whip or a scanner. He just looked at her like she was someone. "What's this one's story?" The human asked, his voice quiet. The slaver laughed. "That one? Worthless. Been here too long. Always trembling. Never talks. Then why keep her?" The man asked again. "Buyers want fresh ones, but we keep the old ones to teach the rest what happens if they fail." The slaver replied with a cruel grin. The human stepped closer. "Open the gate." "What? You serious?" The slaver blinked. "She's barely standing," I said. "Open it," the human repeated. Calm but firm, with a shrug, the slaver tapped the code. The cage door slid open with a creak. Riva shrank back, expecting pain. That's how it always happened, open door. Then pain. The slaver reached for his whip again. "Come on, move, girl." But before he could strike, the human grabbed his wrist. "Don't touch her," he said. Voice cold now. Gasps came from other buyers. Even the guards froze. "You're protecting a slave." The slaver scoffed. "She's not a slave anymore," the human said. Pulling out a credit chip. "Here's your price. You'd pay that much for her." The slaver said, stunned. "She's not worth half of it. She's worth everything you're not," the human replied, and handed over the chip. Then he turned to Riva, who was still crouched in the corner. Her lips trembled, her arms wrapped around her knees. The human kneeled, keeping a soft distance. He didn't pull her, didn't grab her. He just whispered, "You're safe now." The words didn't make sense to Riva. She had heard commands, insults, screams, but never those words. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move. She thought maybe it was a trick. Maybe he wanted her to trust him, only to punish her later. "Take your time," the human said, still kneeling. "We're not in a rush." The slaver rolled his eyes. "She won't walk on her own," but slowly. Shakily, Riva reached out a trembling hand. The human didn't flinch. Didn't look down on her. He gently held her hand. Warm and firm, she stood, weak and unsteady, and the chains around her ankles clinked. He saw the chains, frowned, and pulled a tool from his belt with a small buzz. He cut the metal away. Riva winced, expecting pain, but there was none. Just the feeling of cold air on her bare ankles. He wrapped a thin blanket around her shoulders. Riva had never felt anything so soft before. As they walked toward the gates, the crowd watched in silence. Some with confusion, some with anger. Some with curiosity, but the human didn't look back. He only looked ahead, holding the girl beside him. And for the first time in her life, Riva stepped into a world that didn't feel like a prison. And though her body still shook and her mind was full of fear, one whisper kept echoing inside her heart. "You're safe now?" Riva sat in the corner of the small ship, wrapped in the same blanket the human had given her. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink too much. Her body ached. But not from new wounds, from memories. Her mind kept asking the same question. Why hadn't he hurt her yet? Jace, the human, moved around the cockpit slowly. He didn't look at her like the others did. He didn't stare, didn't shout, didn't order her to clean or kneel. He just flew the ship, pressed a few buttons, and hummed an old Earth tune under his breath. Riva watched him like a scared animal. She expected the trick to come soon. Maybe when the ship left orbit, he would turn. Maybe once the door was locked, he'd show his real face. But hours passed, and nothing happened. He only turned around once to ask, "Are you hungry?" Riva didn't answer. She didn't trust food. Not when it came with kindness. He placed a small tray near her feet. There was water, soft bread, and something warm in a cup. He didn't push it toward her. He just said, "If you want it, it's yours," and walked away. Riva stared at it for a long time. Her stomach growled. Her hands shook, finally, slowly. She picked up the cup. The warmth surprised her. The taste made her eyes water. It was real food. Not the dry pellets she used to get once a day. The ship flew through the stars in silence. Jace didn't ask questions. He didn't demand her story. But she couldn't stop thinking about the words he had whispered. "You're safe now." She repeated it again and again in her mind. What did safe mean? Was it a trick word? A lie? Or did he really mean it? Later, Jace walked into the small back room. Carrying a thin mattress, "I don't have much," he said quietly. "But this is yours now." He placed it on the floor and stepped back. Riva didn't move at first. She didn't understand what was happening. He pointed at the mattress and said, "Not a cage." Then he pointed at himself. "Not a master." She blinked, trying to understand. "No cage," he repeated, slowly, kindly. "No master." Tears rolled down her cheeks before she even realized it. No one had spoken to her like this. No one had offered her anything without asking for something back. Jace looked away, gave her space. "I'll be in the cockpit if you need anything," he said. Then walked out without another word. Riva curled up on the mattress. It was thin, but to her, it felt like heaven. The soft blanket wrapped around her like a shield for the first time in years. She fell asleep without fear, in her dreams. She saw chains break and stars shining above. She heard a voice again and again. "You're safe now. You're safe now." When she woke up. Hours had passed, the ship was quiet, but she could smell something warm. She stepped into the cockpit slowly, barefoot, unsure. Jace was cooking something in a small pan. The smell made her stomach growl again. He turned and smiled gently. "Morning," he said. Though it wasn't really morning, she didn't answer. But she sat down quietly on the floor. Watching him, he handed her a bowl. Not too full, but enough. She took it slowly. Looked at him, then the food. Then she whispered her first word in front of him. "Thank you." Jace's smile didn't grow big or proud. He just nodded, like it was the most normal thing in the world. They sat in silence. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was peaceful. Like the calm after a storm. Later, she pointed at a part of the ship's controls and asked, "What's that?" Jace looked surprised, then smiled. "That's the jump lever," he said. He walked over and showed her, carefully explaining how it worked. She listened closely, nodding slowly. "You're smart," he said. "No one's ever told me that," she replied without thinking. He looked at her, and his voice was soft again. Then they were wrong. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever said things like that to her. No one had ever looked at her like she was more than a tool or a burden. That night, as she lay on her mattress, she whispered to herself, "Safe now," like it was a magic spell. Like if she said it enough, it would become real. Jace sat in the cockpit, looking at an old photo of his sister. She had died during the war. Long ago, he closed his eyes and whispered something to the stars. "Maybe I couldn't save her, but I'll save this one," and far behind them, on the planet Tharkle, posters went up. A slave had been taken, a bounty was offered. But the stars were wide, and for the first time, Riva had a head start. The ship drifted quietly through deep space. No sirens, no shouting, no chains clanking. Just the soft hum of engines and the blinking of tiny lights on the old control panel. Riva sat near the window, legs tucked under her. She stared out at the stars, her face calm, but her heart confused. She had never seen so many stars before. They looked like tiny promises floating in the dark, but she didn't know if they were real. Or if she was still dreaming. Jace walked in, wiping grease off his hands with a dirty rag. He had just fixed the coolant system for the third time that week. His ship, the Silver Quiet, wasn't fancy or fast. But it had heart just like its owner. "You sleep okay?" Jace asked, walking past her. Riva nodded slowly. "Better than before," she whispered. That was true. Though her dreams still came with shadows and distant whips. He gave her a soft smile. "We're stopping soon. Refueling on a small moon. Nothing big, will they? Take me back?" She asked, voice shaking. "No," Jace said firmly. "You're with me now?" Riva didn't answer. She still didn't fully understand why he had taken her. People like her didn't get rescued, not in real life. Later, while Jace worked on the broken stabilizer, Riva sat nearby, watching his tools clanked. And he cursed softly as a part slipped. "Stupid bolt," he muttered. "Can I help?" She asked quietly. Jace blinked, surprised, then nodded. He handed her a small tool. "Here, press and hold this when I say." She did. Her hands steady, but her fingers nervous. He looked up and smiled again. "Good job." That smile made something flutter in her chest. Not fear, not sadness, something else. Something warm. As the hours passed, she learned more about him. Jace was not a rich man, not a soldier anymore. He had fought in the border wars, lost friends, lost family after that. He became a traveler, fixing things, helping where he could. Avoiding the big cities and big trouble. "Do you live anywhere?" Riva asked one night, sitting across from him at the small dinner table. Jace looked up from his bowl. "This is home," he said, pointing at the ship. Riva looked around cracked walls. Flickering lights, old wires. She tilted her head. "It's small, yeah, but it flies," he said with a grin. She smiled too, just a little. She began asking more questions: how ships work, what planets he had seen, what tools did what. Jace answered them all, patiently. He didn't treat her like a child, or like someone broken. He treated her like someone who could learn. And she did learn, quickly. She watched him solder wires, fix fuel lines, recalibrate the sensors. Soon she was helping without asking, handing the right tool, tightening the loose part. Jace started calling her his co-pilot, even if she hadn't touched the steering stick yet. One evening, Riva walked into the cockpit, alone. Jace was sleeping in his chair. Arms crossed, head tilted back. The ship was in autopilot. Flying slow through a quiet sector, she sat down in the seat beside him and looked at the stars again. Her reflection in the glass looked different, less afraid, more alive, she whispered to herself, not a slave. Her fingers touched the controls gently. She didn't press anything, not yet, but she imagined flying. Not running from something, but flying towards something. Suddenly, an alarm beeped. A warning flashed on the panel, unknown ship approaching. Fast Jace woke instantly. Eyes wide, he leaned forward and checked the screen. "Pirates," he said under his breath. Riva's heart pounded. "What do we do?" She asked. "Hide," he said. He steered the ship toward a nearby asteroid field. The pirates followed, but Jace knew this ship like the back of his hand. He weaved between rocks and narrow gaps. Turning off all signals, Riva watched, clutching her seat, as the ship danced between danger. Finally, the pirates turned back, losing interest. Jace let out a long breath and leaned back. "You okay?" he asked. Riva nodded, her hands still trembling. "That was terrifying," she said. He smiled. "Welcome to space." After that, Jace taught her how to lock the doors, power down systems, and read enemy signals. He wasn't just protecting her, he was preparing her. "Out here, you have to be sharp," he told her. "And you're getting sharper." Riva began to feel something she had never felt before. She didn't know the word for it, but it felt like having a place. It felt like being wanted. Jace didn't talk much about why he saved her. But one night, Riva found an old photo in his locker. It was a little girl with silver hair. Standing beside a young Jace, she looked like Riva. Same eyes, same skin tone. She never asked, but something told her. He had lost someone. Maybe saving her wasn't just about her. Maybe it was about healing for both of them. And for the first time in her life, Riva whispered into the quiet of the ship, "This feels like home." Riva woke to flashing lights and warning beeps. Jace was already up, fingers flying over the controls. The screen in front of him glowed red, and a deep alarm buzzed through the ship. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice still heavy with sleep. Jace didn't look at her. "We've been spotted." "By who?" He pointed at the scanner. "Bounty ships." Riva's blood turned cold. She thought they were safe. She thought they had gone far enough. But the past didn't let go so easily. Posters had been spreading across nearby systems, images of her face. Words like stolen property and reward. Whoever owned the slave market on Tharkle wanted her back, and they were willing to pay for it. "We're going dark," Jay said, shutting down lights and non-essential systems. He guided the ship toward a small mining moon. Barely on the charts, the place was full of caves, tunnels, and shadows perfect for hiding. They landed without alerting anyone. The ship's engines cooled in silence. Jace opened the hatch and stepped out. Scanning the rocky land with sharp eyes, "Stay close," he told Riva, handing her a small device. "What is this?" "Tracker jammer, just in case," he said. They moved through the jagged terrain, climbing over rocks and stepping carefully along narrow ledges. The air was cold and the wind whistled between the cliffs. Riva wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the fear grow again. But Jace was steady, always checking behind them, always shielding her. After an hour, they found an abandoned mining shelter hidden inside a cave. Dusty, rusted, but safe for now, they settled inside. Lighting a small heater and setting up a motion alarm near the entrance, Riva sat against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. "How did they find us?" Jace sighed. "Maybe a scan picked up our ship's ID, or maybe someone saw us last time we docked. Will they keep looking?" He nodded. "Until they think you're dead. Or back in chains." Silence followed. Heavy and cold, Riva looked at her hands. Once bound, now shaking. She hated this. She hated feeling weak again. "I'm tired of running," she whispered. Jace looked at her, surprised. She met his eyes. "I don't want to hide forever." He studied her face for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Then we train." That night, under the dim cave light, he began teaching her how to track movement, how to listen to her, how to hold a small stun weapon, how to move quietly. Riva paid attention to every word, every movement. This wasn't just about learning to fight. This was about becoming someone new. Jace even activated his old warbot. Grease. The robot hadn't moved in years. Its body covered in dust and dents. But when Riva placed her hand on its chest and said, "Help me," the machine blinked to life. Command acknowledged. Grease said in a deep robotic voice. Jace stared, stunned. I didn't think he still worked. Riva smiled faintly. Maybe he was waiting the next few days. They trained together. Jace would draw simple maps in the dirt, and Riva would memorize routes, hiding spots, escape paths. She ran drills with Grease, dodging foam blasts. Learning to react, it was hard. Her body wasn't strong, but her mind was sharp. She fell often, but she stood up every time. One evening, while practicing her aim, Riva heard the alarm beep once, then again, louder. She froze. Jace looked at the screen movement near the cave's edge. Not local miners, not animals. These were trained, armored, and fast bounty hunters, Jace said. Loading his blaster, Grease moved to the front of the cave. Shielding them, Jace turned to Riva. You hide. Let me handle this. But Riva shook her head. No, she said, her voice steady. I want to fight beside you. He hesitated. Just for a second, then handed her a stun pistol. Only fire if you have to. Aim low. Stay behind cover. The battle came fast. 2 bounty hunters rushed in, faces hidden behind glowing masks. They fired shock nets and gas pellets. Jace ducked and fired back. Grease blocked the entrance. Taking heavy hits but holding strong, one bounty hunter slipped past Grease and aimed right at Riva. She froze for a heartbeat, then remembered everything Jace had taught her. She rolled behind cover, aimed, and fired. The stun shot hit the hunter's leg, sending him crashing into the wall. Unconscious, Jace turned and saw her. His face showed shock but also pride. You did it, he said, panting. Riva's hands were shaking, but her eyes were clear. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she whispered. After the fight, they patched up Grease and packed quickly. Jace looked at her as they climbed back into the ship. You're not just surviving now, he said. You're fighting. Riva looked at the stars as they left the moon behind. The past was still chasing her. But she wasn't running anymore. She was ready. And if they came again, she would be waiting. The stars outside moved slowly, drifting like quiet waves. Inside the ship, the air was still. Riva sat beside Grease, carefully fixing a burned wire in his arm. Jace watched from across the room, leaning against the doorframe. You've got a steady hand, he said softly. Riva didn't look up. I've been learning. She twisted the tool one more time, and the small circuit blinked green. Grease's fingers twitched. Arm functionality restored. Riva smiled, proud of herself since the fight in the cave. Something had changed between her and Jace. He didn't see her as someone broken anymore, and she didn't see him as just a rescuer. They had become something else partners that night. Jace made hot soup from the last of their food packs. He handed Riva a bowl, and for the first time, she didn't wait for permission to eat. They sat across from each other in the tiny kitchen, their spoons clinking softly. Where did you learn to fight like that? She asked. Jace gave a tired laugh. War taught me, not by choice. Did you ever get scared? All the time, he said, but I fought anyway. Riva nodded slowly. I want to be like that. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, You already are. Later. Riva helped clean the tools and organize the storage room. Jace watched her work with quiet amazement. When he first saw her in that cage, she could barely speak. Now she was moving through the ship like she belonged there. But something still sat heavy in Riva's chest, a question she had been too afraid to ask. That night, as the ship floated in the dark, Riva knocked on the cockpit door. Jace turned, surprised. Can't sleep? No, she whispered. Stepping inside, he made space for her on the small bench beside the controls. I need to ask you something, she said. Looking at the floor, anything, he replied. Why did you choose me? She asked. There were others in that yard, stronger, cleaner. Worth more. Jace was quiet for a while. Then he sighed. Because you reminded me of someone. He reached into a side drawer and pulled out a small photo. It was old and faded. A young girl stood beside a smiling human woman. Recognized the silver hair and soft blue skin. She was my sister's daughter, Jace said. Her name was Elira. She was half human. Half Cenari. She disappeared during a raid years ago. Riva stared at the photo, feeling her heart ache. She looks like me. She was like you, Jace whispered. Strong, gentle, brave. He wiped his eyes, then looked at her. When I saw you, I thought maybe. I had a second chance not to replace her, he added quickly. But to do something right. Riva's hands shook as she gave the photo back. No one's ever chosen me for anything, she said, voice cracking. You don't have to be her, Jace said. You just have to be you. Riva looked at him. And for the first time in her life, she believed someone meant it. The next day, Jace gave her a new tool belt. It was too big and hung low on her hips, but she grinned like it was made of gold. He carved her name into a small metal tag and clipped it onto the front. Name means you belong, he said. Riva touched the tag again and again. She hadn't heard her real name in years. Now it was backhand, shining on her belt, together. They repaired the ship's broken shield systems. Jace taught her how to fly in low-gravity zones. He even let her take the controls for a short jump. She held her breath the whole time. But when they arrived safely, she laughed out loud. They landed on a small trade station to get supplies. Riva wore a borrowed jacket and kept her hood up, but her eyes were full of wonder. It was the first time she walked freely through a crowd. Not as a slave, not as property, but as someone. Jace bought food packs, fuel cells, and a few spare parts. Riva picked a packet of dried fruit. Unsure if it was allowed, Jace just nodded and said, "Put it in the cart." She smiled all the way back to the ship. But as they approached their dock, Riva froze. Two armored figures stood near their ship. Scanning it, she pulled Jace behind a metal crate. "Bounty hunters," she whispered. Jace peeked around the corner, eyes narrowing. They couldn't fight, not here. Not in public. He looked at Riva, ready for a detour. She nodded. Together, they turned and vanished into the crowd. They would take the long way back. Maybe steal a cargo loader and sneak around. But as they moved, Riva didn't feel scared. She felt ready. She wasn't running alone anymore, and the bond between her and Jace built, not from blood, but from choice, was strong enough to face anything ahead. The galaxy was wide, but running only made it feel smaller. Every spaceport, every planet, every crowd, Riva felt eyes following her. She was tired of hiding, tired of shrinking into corners. The fear was always there, just behind her breath. But something stronger had begun to grow beside its anger. Jace noticed the change. She didn't flinch as much. Didn't whisper anymore. She stood taller, spoke clearly, asked questions. But he could see it in her eyes. She needed more than escape. She needed justice. One evening, inside the ship, Riva walked to the control panel and pointed at a system on the star map. "Tharkle," she said. Jace looked up from his seat. "What about it?" "We go back," she said, voice calm but steady. Jace's brow furrowed. "Riva, that's where I know," she cut in. "That's where I lost everything. That's where I want to speak." Jace didn't answer right away. He stared at the map, then at her. "Are you sure?" "No," she whispered, "but I don't want to be afraid of that place anymore." He nodded slowly. Then stood, Then we go." They didn't go in loud. They landed near the edge of the city, in the shadows of the scrap fields. Jace contacted an old friend, Vesa, a resistance informant who once fought against the slave markets. Vesa met them in a hidden tunnel beneath the city. Her skin green and her eyes sharp. "You brought her back here?" Vesa asked Jace, shocked. "She brought me," he said. Looking at Riva with pride, Vesa scanned Riva with a small device. Her face hardened as she read the data. "You were sold as illegal stock. Your registration was forged. You were never supposed to be in that yard." Riva's heart beat faster. "Can we prove it?" Vesa smiled faintly. "Oh yes, and more. They planned it quietly." Vesa would leak the files to the news grids. Riva would speak during the public review held by the Planetary Rights Council. If they had enough evidence, the slaver's license would be revoked and he'd be arrested. The day arrived faster than Riva expected. She stood before a wide hall, cameras blinking, lights burning. Behind her sat Jace, Vesa, and 2 neutral officers. Ahead of her was the man who had kept her in chains, Master Jernak. Jernak sneered as she stepped forward. Well, he said. "The little animal speaks." Riva didn't blink. "I have a name," she said clearly. "It's Riva." Gasps came from the crowd. Jernak laughed. "You were mine." "You're still nothing." Riva looked straight at the council. "I was taken as a child, sold without record. Beaten for years." She pulled back her sleeve. "Showing the faint scars on her arms, you called it training. I call it cruelty." Vesa activated a holoscreen. "Showing files, records, illegal trade logs." "This is not a case of misunderstanding," Vesa said. "This is a system of abuse," the council whispered among themselves. Jernak's face twisted in rage. "You can't do this. She's property." "No," Jay said, stepping forward. "She's Riva. And she's free." Jernak reached for something on his belt, a hidden weapon. Everything moved fast. Riva saw the flash of metal. Saw Jace reaching for his blaster. But this time, she didn't wait to be saved. She grabbed the stun rod from the guard's side, rolled forward, and struck Jernak in the leg. He howled, dropping to the ground, weapon clattering away. Guards rushed in and pinned him down. Riva stood above him, breathing hard, hands still shaking. She wasn't hiding anymore, not in a cage, not in silence, not in fear. The council stood. "Effective immediately," the head judge said. "The license of Jernak Holdings is revoked. All property contracts are dissolved. And Riva of Tharkal is declared a free citizen." Applause broke out, small at first. But real Riva's eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness, not from fear this time. From something brighter. Relief. Jay stepped beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she said, wiping her face. "We did." That night, back on the ship, Vesa handed her a small ID card. Her name was printed in bold letters. Riva Solari. She looked at Jace. Confused, "You chose a last name," he said. "It means of the stars, fitting, don't you think?" Riva held the card like it was made of gold. She was no longer a number. She had a name, a voice, and a place in the galaxy. And she had one more thing she never expected, a future. The stars outside the ship sparkled like jewels scattered across dark velvet. Riva stood at the window of the cockpit, her reflection staring back at her strong. Calm, free. It still felt strange sometimes. To breathe without fear. To sleep without nightmares. To walk without chains. It had been 2 weeks since the trial on Tharkal. Since she faced Master Jernak and stood tall in front of the entire council. Since the world stopped calling her property and finally called her Riva. She hadn't gone back to the yard where she once lived in a cage. She didn't need to, because the cage no longer lived inside her. Jace walked into the cockpit, yawning. He carried 2 mugs of hot tea and handed one to her. "Big day tomorrow," he said. Riva nodded. Yeah. She sipped her tea slowly. Looking at the blinking stars, do you think I'll be good at it? I think you already are, Jace said with a smile. But it's okay to be nervous tomorrow. Riva was starting her first job, official, legal, paid. She had joined the Interplanetary Mechanics Guild. The same people who once turned away from her when she wore chains now welcomed her because of the skill she'd learned beside Jace. I still can't believe I'm getting my own ID badge, she whispered. It's real, Jace replied, and you earned it that night. Riva lay in her bunk, the one Jace had built just for her months ago. She stared at the ceiling and remembered her first night on the ship, cold, shaking, scared to even sleep. Now she pulled her blanket around her shoulders and smiled. Tomorrow, she would walk into a space station not as someone hiding, but as someone needed. The next day, they docked at Station A Arani, a massive orbital platform floating above a green-blue planet. Shuttles came and went, and people from all species walked through the terminals. Riva stepped off the ship, wearing her new uniform navy blue with a silver stripe across the chest. Her ID badge hung proudly from her collar. She took a deep breath and walked into the guild hall. No one stared, no one whispered. They greeted her like any other worker. She reported to the hangar bay and was assigned to Repair Bay 4. An old cargo ship had engine trouble, and her supervisor waved her over. You're Riva. The woman asked. Yes, Riva said, standing straight. You're Jace's apprentice. Was Riva corrected gently? Now I'm a mechanic. The woman grinned. Good. Get your gloves on. Riva worked all morning changing power cells, welding a cracked fuel pipe, replacing a worn coil. Her hands moved fast and steady. She didn't need help. She knew what she was doing. During lunch, she sat with the crew. No one asked where she came from. No one needed to. After her shift, she returned to the silver quiet. Jace was inside, fixing the navigation console. How was it? He asked without looking up. Riva sat beside him and pulled off her gloves. It was perfect, she said, smiling wide. I didn't mess up once. I never said you would, he replied. They sat together, surrounded by tools and wires. Jace reached into a small drawer and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He handed it to her. Riva opened it slowly, revealing a small silver pendant in the shape of a star. It was a lyris, Jace said softly. I think she'd want you to have it now. Riva's hands trembled. She had seen the girl's picture before, the niece Jace had lost long ago. She looked like her, but she was not a replacement. She was something new, something different. I don't know what to say, Riva whispered. You've already said it, Jace replied. You became it. Riva slipped the pendant around her neck and looked out the window. The stars no longer looked cold or unreachable. They looked like home. Weeks passed, then months. Riva kept working, kept growing. Her name appeared in reports. Riva Solari led tech on docking bay repairs. She trained others, even helped design new tools for small hand use. The galaxy didn't change overnight, but she had changed, and that was enough to start something new. One night, a young alien girl arrived at the station. Shivering and scared, she had no ID, no family, and bruises on her arms. Riva was called in to help translate. She knelt in front of the girl, speaking softly. You're safe now, she whispered. Just like Jace once whispered to her. The girl clung to her, and Riva wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. It felt like everything had come full circle. Not because her past was gone, but because she had finally stepped beyond it. On her next day off, Riva and Jace sat on the top deck of the ship. Watching the stars again, Jace raised a small toast. To the girl who used to live in the shadows, Riva clinked her cup with his. And to the man who pulled her out, they sat in silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of peace. Riva smiled. She was never a slave again. She never would be. Because she had a name, she had a voice. And now she had a future.